To abuse an innocent, helpless child is despicable and a grievous crime against God and humanity. In order to check this anomaly, the 1989 United Nations Convention on the Rights of a Child, which sets out the civil, political, economic, social, health and cultural rights of children, was adopted and domesticated in Nigeria in the year 2003 as the Child Rights Act. You are watching NAPTIP on the Move, and I am Emmanuel Okeke. Thank you for joining us. On this episode, we will focus on issues pertaining to child abuse in Nigeria and the role of NAPTIP in curbing this very ugly occurrence. Stay with NAPTIP on the Move.
The Child Rights Act of 2003 provides for the welfare, best interest and protection of every Nigerian child. It also stipulates elements that constitutes child abuse.
You can abuse a child physically, mentally. You call the child all sorts of names and make the child feel not capable of being able to achieve anything. And that child grows up to lose confidence in himself or herself. So that way you've abused that child mentally. And physically, you can abuse a child through torture, bad ill treatment, and things like that. So child abuse, it's something that can affect a child either through the mind or the physical appearance.
We also have neglect. A lot of people do not consider this as a form of abuse. So we see caregivers depriving their child of food and basic necessities, food, shelter. Even when a child is deprived of going to school, it can also be seen as a form of neglect. Then there is sexual abuse. And sexual abuse is any sexual act that involves a child, between a child and an adult. So any sexual act at all. And this is broadly categorized into two. We have physical acts of sexual abuse that involves physical touch, like the rape, incest, or when you touch the child, when there's contact between the child and the abuser. And then there are non-physical forms of sexual abuse where the child is not touched but is also being abused sexually. Take for instance when a child is shown pornography or a child is exposed to an adult's genitals, with the intention of getting sexual pleasure by that adult.
Under the Child Rights Act, a child is entitled to certain, good things of life, certain benefits and certain rights, so to say, including having a good name. When a child is born, you give the child a name. And a child is entitled to play at playtime. A child is entitled to be enrolled in school. A child is entitled to freedom of movement. A child is entitled to happiness. When a child is not allowed to grow its normal growth, both physically and spiritually, mentally, you have subjected that child to child abuse.
The National Agency for the Prohibition of Trafficking in Persons is charged with the responsibility of protecting abused children.
NAPTIP also administers the Violence Against Persons Prosecution Act, and so it's domiciled with NAPTIP. So we are not only concerned with issues of human or child trafficking, but we're also concerned with issues of violence against persons, and child abuse is of course one of those acts of violence against persons.
We investigate cases of violence or any form of abuses against them. We investigate it, and once it is found that yes, this child was abused, we come after the person, and the evidence of that particular child is sacrosanct to us. Gone are the days they will say, oh, that child is a child. You know, if that child's statement is not corroborated, then you cannot use it. But the judges are becoming very conscious of the fact that yes, children, you know, can speak the truth. You know, so when they say it happened to them, and they are able to give the story graphically, I believe that evidence should say true.
Apart from physical, psychological, neglect and sexual abuse, hawking is also a form of abuse.
Some forms of physical abuse, child labor, and even child trafficking expose children and make them more vulnerable to sexual abuse. When a child is deprived of going to school or from play and is said instead to go and work, be involved in hazardous work or go and hawk, you're exposing that child to the elements out there. There are several cases of children who were hawking and were lured into lonely and uncompleted buildings, you know, and were raped in the process.
Instances of physical abuse of children has become rampant.
There was a case of a child, you know, who was reported that the madam that he was living with poured hot oil on his body, and to make things worse, did not get medical attention for that child, and that child had to carry that bruise. He became infected before a neighbor now called the attention of other neighbors, and they had to rush this child to a hospital. We've had, you know, so many cases of madams who cannot control anger. There's issue of anger management, you know, and using hot iron on, yes, even their children or the words and house helps that they are staying with them. And you find various aggravated forms of physical harm and injury being inflicted on children in the name of disciplining that child. Because even if that child doesn't behave that way when you are there, it doesn't mean that that child has learned not to do that thing better. You know, so there is a huge need for orientation in the minds of our parents to look for other forms of correcting behavior rather than inflicting bodily harm.
We've had cases where a child's hands were dipped in hot water, and then another case where a child hot iron was put on the child's body. In fact, there are so many gory cases I don't even want to talk about. You know, it makes me very upset. You know, so we've been able to rescue such children, take them to the shelter, rehabilitate them, and prosecute the offenders.
For domestic servitude, there is a stipulated age limit.
What we have in our current law is 12 years, you know, and above, you know. But it depends on the circumstances. For us, we are advocating that a child should not be able to walk until that child is above 17, meaning 18 and above. That is when we believe that child has good bargaining power to be able to bargain for his or her wages.
Yes, there is a place because of the society we live in now, there is a place where, yes, you feel you cannot cope, you need people to help you take care of your children, but then you shouldn't put another child's life at risk because you want to protect your own child. Doing that will place all children under you know, at risk. So it is a crime, and we see now that NAPTIP is on the move, and NAPTIP is really taking their job seriously, and a lot of awareness is out there. You know, parents need to know that it is a crime, you know, and they should desist from such acts.
There is also a worrisome trend of rape and defilement of children. This has severe consequence on the development of the child.
The Violence Against Children survey, you know, this was a survey carried out in 2014, you know, when there was an attempt by the federal government, the first of its type in Nigeria and in fact in West Africa, when they tried to determine the magnitude of abuses that children go through, you know, and they looked at the three most broad forms of abuse of children, which is physical, emotional, and sexual. abuse, and they found there was a huge prevalence, of abuse. And the statistics from that survey tell us that 1 in every 4 girls and 1 in every 10 boys will be sexually abused before they are 18 years. So that is a huge figure, and that survey also estimates 9 million children in a year will be so abused. We get cases every day of children. Our youngest has been, not in recent times, but there was a time we had a case of a 6-month-old baby who was reported to us that was sexually abused by a neighbor. Very recently, we handled one of a 15-year-old who was sexually abused by her stepfather. We're having increased cases of incest on our hands now, of fathers and blood relatives who are abusing children now. We're having cases of teachers, and people who are caregivers who should care for children, abusing children. Or in some cases, other crimes are committed by way of child marriage, and say, okay, this child was raped, this child was abused. The only way this can be settled is if the child is married off. So there is a need for the society and all sectors of the society to arise, to begin to speak out against this form of abuse, because it's tearing at the very fabric of our society. The children, and there are so many effects and consequences. We see cases of pregnancy, which yes is an issue. There are cases of STIs, sexually transmitted infections and rashes and all of that. But there are other silent consequences. Take, for instance, the emotional and behavioral consequences where a child becomes scarred for life. There are issues of suicidal tendencies. Children growing up into dysfunctional adults who cannot keep a relationship, who cannot keep a home, who have aggression and anger management issues. Sometimes even becoming an abuser themselves because they internalize the abuse that was done, and after a while, they take it as normal and they begin to exhibit sexualized behavior.
Shelter services provided by the agency is a major strategy in handling cases of child abuse.
The shelter we have is called Halfway Home. It is shelters meant to protect these victims, so that we can have access to them. We have a department called Counseling and Rehabilitation Department, where we have counselors, psychologists who take care of the emotional stability, physiological stability of these victims. To have them stable, mentally, and be able to tell us the story of what happened to them. So I will tell you that our shelter is one of our strongest points in combating crime. Because once a crime takes place, we are able to rescue the victim from the scene of crime, separate them from their violators. By so doing, issue of threats will not arise any longer, because they threaten some of these victims not to talk. So, but once that victim is in our shelter, then we have separated them from their violator. So they will now be stable and they feel happy.
Most of the children at the NAPTIP shelter are victims of all forms of violence, and the agency has intensified efforts in the prosecution of offenders. NAPTIP is collaborating with different organizations, including the Sexual Offences Awareness and Victims Rehabilitation Initiative, SOAR.
We started work in 2011, and our mandate is to raise awareness concerning the issues of sexual abuse of children, advocate for them, build the capacity of stakeholders, caregivers, and children themselves to respond adequately, and then provide psychosocial support, especially by the way of counseling support groups for children who have been sexually abused. NAPTIP was placed as the implementers and they need to enforce the Violence Against Persons Act in 2015. And so since 2016, we've been collaborating with them. All of our sexual abuse cases, rape cases, we send it to NAPTIP. And I must say the collaboration has been fantastic. NAPTIP is rising to the occasion and taking charge of the situation of violence against children and violence against persons generally.
To curb child abuse, providing an enabling environment, education and sports is key.
We are appealing to local government authorities, we are appealing to state government authorities to establish more social centers, where children who cannot be properly taken care of by those who, brought them to this world can be taken to. The federal government is doing whatever it should do, but state government, local government should do everything they need to do. All child of children should be in school. You know, if the family is not able to support that, government should do that. So we are happy that there are some reforms taking place, you know, in most states, and the federal government is also aiding and assisting them. And for the children too that cannot go far with their education, honestly speaking, there are other avenues. Sports are there. Several sporting activities are available where children can harness their talents, you know, and they will still be a better person, you know. And the entertainment area is also there. So we should encourage ourselves to ensure that our children, you know, get some kind of knowledge. You know, once you have that knowledge, you go places.
With the rise in cases of various forms of child abuse, parents are advised to live up to their responsibilities.
I just want to advise parents to bring up their children properly and not to give out their young children to anyone at all. Even relations, friends, or so-called well-wishers who think they want to assist. And that age between 5 years to 18 years is the most important time of their lives. And if you get it wrong, you can either you ruin the child for life, you know. So it's very important that parents just try hard to take care of their children, keep them under their wings until they are mature enough to go out of the homes.
NAPTIP encourages the general public to report all cases of child abuse.
If you see any child that is being abused, either mentally or physically, please report to NAPTIP, and NAPTIP will definitely come to the rescue of the child and prosecute the offender.
There is no excuse for child abuse. Stop the silence and join hands with NAPTIP to kick child abuse out of Nigeria.
Every day, NAPTIP receives reports on all forms of violence against persons, diverse cases of domestic violence, rape, incest, physical abuse, especially child abuse. This has got to stop. NAPTIP is ever ready to ensure justice for victims, but you have to speak up. NAPTIP is working tirelessly to ensure that victims are compensated and offenders severely punished. But we need a lot of support. The VAP Act can be most effective when each state government takes the required steps to domesticate the act. The victims shun the culture of silence and neighbors step in to act. We all have a role to play in the effective implementation of the VAP Act. This is a call to all state governors to waste no further time in securing the life and well-being of their indigents. NAPTIP is working with different stakeholders, including the Rule of Law and Anti-Corruption Program of the British Council. But we need more support to stop violence against persons in Nigeria.
Report all cases of violence against persons to these hotlines: 0703 0000 203, 080 2255 627847. NAPTIP, ensuring a human trafficking and violence-free nation.
A child may be dying in silence right under your nose, so be vigilant and report cases of child abuse to NAPTIP. Up next is NAPTIP Events. Don't go away.
The Director General of NAPTIP, Dame Julie Okadonle, and her team recently received the First Secretary Liaison Officer, Canada Border Service Agency, Tyson George, at the agency's headquarters in Abuja.
When I come here, I speak with partners. I speak with European partners. I speak with U.S. partners. I speak with other Nigerian agencies that are here, and everyone, without fail, always has good things to say about NAPTIP. And we're trying to see what kind of capacity building projects that may be that the Canada Border Services Agency and the Royal Canadian Mounted Police might be able to develop in the region. So this is very preliminary stages at this point, and I'm trying to determine some of the needs in Nigeria and how that can have a connection to Canada. So this is one of the reasons why I wanted to come and speak with you guys today, because we want the Canadian government, we want a partner that we can trust, and we want a partner who will do tangible work.
The Director General of NAPTIP enlightened the First Secretary on the mandate of the agency.
It's a federal government agency, and it was created in response to combating the scourge of human trafficking. It was actually established in 2003 through an act of parliament, which was reenacted in 2015 as the Trafficking in Persons Prohibition, Enforcement and Administration Act. We also administered the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act 2015. So we're not just taking care of human trafficking, we also deal with cases of violence against persons generally, children, men and women. Our operational strategy is, we call it the 5 Ps. That's the prevention, protection, prosecution, partnership and policy. And so far we've rescued about 13,573 victims. Of course we have challenges just like every other person has challenges, training, research, prosecution, victim empowerment, because we have to empower the victims after rehabilitating them.
She then highlighted areas of possible collaboration.
The areas of possible collaboration, which is what you are interested in here, is training of NAPTIP officers on contemporary investigations, prosecution, victim protection, care and skills. And of course strengthening international cooperation between Nigeria and Canada towards effective identification, tracing and confiscation of assets of traffickers, that is when it becomes external, as well as return of such proceeds for forfeiture. Intelligence gathering and communication with NAPTIP and other relevant law enforcement agencies at home and foreign governments, support towards victims' empowerment and research activities.
The meeting was very interactive, as both parties agreed to work together in curbing human trafficking and migrant smuggling in Nigeria. Wardclef Anti-Brigade Club of the Great Heights Academy, Kado, Abuja, paid a visit to the agency's headquarters to learn more about human trafficking and violence against persons. The students were received by a team from the NAPTIP Public Enlightenment Department. Presentations on the menace of human trafficking and violence against persons were given by Helen Emuze and Cynthia Nnoli, both Assistant Chief Intelligence Officers. Ibrahim Isiaka, a staff of the Great Heights Academy and the coordinator of Wardclef Anti-Brigade Club, shed more light on the students' visit.
We have been teaching them about human trafficking, and we came for the purpose of them having first-hand information of what human trafficking is all about in Nigeria, what are the main causes of human trafficking in Nigeria, and possibly what are the solutions to human trafficking in Nigeria, and for them to equally learn the negative effect of human trafficking in Nigeria.
Some of the students then commended the agency.
I have learned that there are a lot of factors that lead to human trafficking, which include greed on the side of the parents of the trafficked victims and ignorance, and then poverty and corruption that is in our country. And there are a lot of more factors which lead to this human trafficking.
Human trafficking as a vice in Nigeria and other countries should be taught to girls, especially to enlighten them and show them that once you see or hear a person saying something that is too good to be true, you don't really listen to that person.
The visit was an opportunity for NAPTIP to sensitize children on human trafficking and violence against persons. As the saying goes, catch them young. The NAPTIP Lagos commander, Daniel Atokolo, recently received the liaison officer from the German Federal Police, Kawa Werner, at the Lagos Zonal Command. Issues discussed at the meeting include strengthened collaboration and information sharing amongst stakeholders in the fight against human trafficking. Kawa Werner commended the agency for its activities and offered assistance and cooperation whenever needed, especially in cases of interest to the German government. In a related development, the NAPTIP Lagos commander also received the new Southwest coordinator for the National Emergency Management Agency, NEMA, Idris Mohammed, in the company of the outgoing coordinator, Yakubu Suleiman, at the Lagos Zonal Command. The meeting was aimed at ensuring continuous collaboration and synergy between the agencies. Daniel Atokolo welcomed the Southwest coordinator, Idris Mohammed, to Lagos and assured him of the command's full cooperation whenever needed. Partnership is one of the agency's key strategy in the fight against human trafficking and violence against persons. NAPTIP On the Move is co-sponsored by the Rule of Law and Anti-Corruption Programme, ROLAC, funded by the European Union and implemented by the British Council. For more enquiries and support, or to report cases of suspected human trafficking and child abuse, please call NAPTIP hotlines on 0703 0000 203 or 0800-2255-627847 or email info@naptip.gov.ng. Visit our website www.naptip.gov.ng. Follow us on our social media platforms at NAPTIP Nigeria and watch our videos on YouTube.
It's time to say goodbye, but not without urging you to rise up to the occasion. Save a life today by reporting cases of human trafficking, domestic violence, and child abuse to NAPTIP. I am Emmanuel Okeke. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.